The wind swept low across the open fields, wide, green, and deceptively peaceful. But beneath that silence pulsed the tremble of war drums and the tension of 1,000 men holding their breath. It was not just a battlefield, it was a reckoning. On one side stood the soldiers of the Brotherhood, once rebels now forged into an army under General Qingyun's banner. Hardened by hunger, betrayal, and the blood of countless skirmishes, they stood shoulder to shoulder. Some gripped spears with trembling fingers. Others, like Zhao Er-Hu and Wu-Yang, held their weapons like extensions of themselves, ready, waiting. Across the horizon, dust spiraled like smoke from the earth. An army approached, armor gleaming, flags snapping in the wind, organized, well-fed, and confident. They believed the field already belonged to them, but they didn't know what lived inside these men. On one side stood the soldiers of the Brotherhood, once rebels now forged into an army under General Qingyun's banner. Hardened by hunger, betrayal, and the blood of countless skirmishes, they stood shoulder to shoulder. Some gripped spears with trembling fingers. Others, like Zhao Er-Hu and Wu-Yang, held their weapons like extensions of themselves. Across the horizon, dust spiraled like smoke from the earth. An army approached, armor gleaming, flags snapping in the wind, organized, well-fed, and confident. They believed the field already belonged to them, but they didn't know what lived inside these men. It was not just a battlefield, it was a reckoning. Beneath that silence pulsed the tremble of war drums and the tension of 1,000 men holding their breath. The cavalry charged first, steel hooves tearing into the earth, blades raised to split flesh from bone. Pang raised his sword, eyes cold with certainty, and gave the signal. Arrows flew like thunderclouds. The first wave collapsed under a rain of death. Then came the crush, man against man, shield against spear, roar against silence. Pang led the front like a storm incarnate. He moved with ruthless precision, striking not for elegance but survival. His blade was neither graceful nor hesitant. It simply killed. Each swing carved space in the chaos. Each shout carried the will of a man who had tasted loss and turned it into fire. Zhao Er-Hu fought like a beast unleashed. He didn't command, he inspired, throwing himself into the thickest bloodshed, dragging comrades from death, challenging enemies with fearless rage. Pang's forces were pushed back. He saw it, the hesitation, the fear. The line was bending. Beside him, Wu-Yang darted like a shadow, quieter, sharper, the blade of the Brotherhood's soul, the turning point, desperation, and resolve. The enemy regrouped, fresh troops surged in waves, and the field became a quagmire of mud and blood. Men screamed, horses thrashed, limbs broke beneath collapsing formations. It was not glory, it was slaughter. He rode across the flank, rallying with fury. "Hold your ground, hold for your brothers." And they did. With fresh resolve, they locked shields. Spears braced. The enemy came, and this time they met a wall, not of armor, but of unbreakable will. Zhao led a flanking strike, charging the enemy's right with a furious cry. Wu-Yang followed with his unit, slipping behind the lines like ghosts, cutting down officers and sowing confusion. Pang saw the break. He spurred his horse straight into the heart of the chaos, his cape soaked in dirt and blood, his sword raised high. The enemy commander spotted him and charged, but it was too late. The earth still held the memory, soft with blood, scarred by boot and blade. The fog of smoke lingered low, hugging the grass like ghosts waiting for judgment. It was here in this vast, broken plain that two worlds met in full collision. The horn sounded again, not in warning but in fury. From the western ridge they emerged, horses by the hundreds, riders cloaked in torn armor, banners flapping like tattered wings of war. Qingyun sat tall at the front, his eyes not on the enemy but locked on the opening they'd waited for. His sword rested across his lap, not raised, not rushed, waiting. Below them the enemy surged. Steel clanged against steel. Men fell, rose, and fell again in mud-soaked combat. Shields shattered under axes, pikes pierced through ribs. Commanders shouted themselves hoarse to hold the line. But the ground was already slipping from beneath their feet. And then Pang moved. The order was silent, almost spiritual. His hand twitched, and the cavalry launched. The battlefield was chaos, clashing steel, splintered wood, screams scattered by wind. But Qingyun moved like silence within the storm. Where others shouted, he did not speak. Where others hesitated, he advanced. His eyes were steady, burning not with anger, but with purpose forged in betrayal and scarred by too many graves. Their swords clashed in a savage rhythm, blade against blade, strike against strike, their feet kicking up mud. His blade rose, not as a threat but as judgment. 3 soldiers charged him first, young, eager, shouting his name like it would weaken him. They were wrong. The first came in low, spear leveled. Pang pivoted with a slight shift of his heel, stepping past the thrust. His sword snapped down, severing the shaft. And then an explosion tore through the ridge. Dirt, limbs, and steel launched skyward like broken teeth from the mouth of war. Men were tossed like dolls, screaming mid-air before silence swallowed them. A second blast roared behind the first, closer, louder. Gunpowder and ash soaked every breath. And then, more came. Enemies flooded toward him. 10, maybe 12, trained men, armored, screaming his death like a prophecy, but Pang moved through them like a ghost wearing flesh. He did not waste motion. His sword did not sing, it howled. Steel met steel, 1 step forward, parry, slash, spin, elbow, draw blood. Sparks danced like fireflies in battle. A blade grazed his cheek, his only wound, but he didn't flinch. He let the pain remind him. He was alive, and these men would not leave this ground breathing. 2 swords came at him at once. Pang raised his blade, locked them both, then shoved them apart with brute strength. Before they recovered, he drove his pommel into one man's temple, then cut through the other from hip to shoulder in a single, brutal arc. The blade sank deep. Pang staggered, eyes wide, as steel drove through his shoulder. The impact knocked him sideways, dropping him to one knee. Blood burst from the wound like fire through cracked stone. Zhao Er-Hu arrived like a storm. Without hesitation, Er-Hu gripped the hilt buried in Pang's flesh. Enemies circled now. 10, 15, more in the shadows. Drums beat in the distance. The sound of war surrounding them. Smoke curled at their feet like ghosts. Pang growled through his teeth, sweat streaking the blood on his face. The 3 brothers stood back to back. Pang, pale but still burning with fury. Er-Hu beside him, face grim and blade ready. No words now. Only breathing. Only steel. They were outnumbered, but not yet out of fight. Wu-Yang, spear spinning, eyes scanning every movement. He spun, kicked another down, then turned, panting, eyes scanning the growing swarm around them. At their front, a warlord draped in dark fur, his face weathered, eyes sharp like a hawk's. He had seen everything, the betrayal, the bravery, the blood. He raised his fist, and his riders roared into the fray. He pulled him up, shoving the man behind the ruins of a shattered cart. Too slow, he dove through the smoke, sword gleaming with soot and sun. The warlord cut down 3 men in a single sweep and reached Pang's side. Without a word, he nodded once, respect unspoken but earned. Together their blades carved a path through the collapsing ranks. Then came the gang leader, the one who had started it, who had once mocked their weakness. He tried to flee, but Zhao Er-Hu saw him. With blood dripping from his blade and rage burning in his chest, Er-Hu pushed through the scattering enemies, sprinted across the broken earth, and tackled the fleeing warlord from his horse. They rolled in the mud, grunting, striking, snarling like animals. Then, one clean motion. Zhao drove his blade across the leader's throat. A red arc danced in the air. The man gasped, hands clawing uselessly, then fell still in the dirt. It was over. What had begun as strategy was now pure survival. Er-Hu returned, splattered in blood but smiling. For the first time in that long, brutal hour, they laughed. Not because it was easy, but because they had survived. Because they had fought as brothers, and won.